Hey, welcome everyone to MIPIN's March webinar. The title of the webinar today is Expanding Awareness of Lesser Celandine in the Midwest. We have two wonderful speakers with us today, Carolyn Miller with the Beal Botanical Garden and Stephanie Day, who's the coordinator for the Mid-Michigan CISMA. I will give each of them a full introduction in just a moment. But first, I always like to tell folks a little bit about the Midwest Invasive Plant Network. We've been around about 20 years now. We coordinate with agencies and organizations across the region with the goal of reducing the impacts of invasive plants. I'd like to recognize our current sponsors. We are generously supported by the Invasive Species Center in Ontario, Merck M. Holman Inc. in Indiana, and Alpha Nurseries in Michigan. If your organization would like to become a MIPIN sponsor, I'll be dropping my contact information in the chat, and I invite you to reach out to me. I also want to recognize the USDA Forest Service. We have a project funded through them called Prevention and Early Detection of Invasive Plants in High Priority Midwest Forests. Lesser celandine is one of our plants of concern. So we're happy to highlight that today, and we appreciate the Forest Service support. And just if you're not familiar with MIPIN, I encourage you to go to MIPIN.org, our website. We have a great deal of resources there, everything from a regional Midwest invasive plant list, information on annual conferences, control information. We can link you to information from the Woody Invasives of the Great Lakes Collaborative, which we also manage. Um, we have a CISMA representative with us today. So CISMA is Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area. We just updated our directory. So if you're looking for local support, check that out. We have guides for site restoration, directories for contractors and nursery plant and seed providers. So a lot of different resources. Again, you can check them out here. And then we hope you'll stay connected to us. We have a quarterly newsletter, an email listserv. We have a relatively new events page and calendar. So again, all of those available through our website. You can also keep track of us on social media through Instagram, Facebook, and of course, this webinar and all of our past and future webinars will be put up to YouTube. Okay, so thank you everyone for being with us today. If you're in a position to help support our work and support our continuation of this and other webinar series, there's a QR code here. You can make a donation, any amount, anytime, always welcome. I'll also drop a link in the chat because obviously this isn't going to be up for very long for you. Okay, I am going to stop sharing and invite our presenters to share their screen. And I'm going to give them a introduction here. So we are so fortunate today to have two great speakers. We have Carolyn Miller. She is the Arboretum and Invasive Species Coordinator for Michigan State University. She maps and records data for all of the trees and shrubs across more than 5,000 acres of the university's campus. She spearheads invasive species removal across campus as well to restore habitats. She's actively served on the steering and partner committees of the Mid-Michigan CISMA. Again, that's Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area. She's been doing that since 2018, and she's currently the vice president of the Red Cedar chapter of Wild Ones. She's on the board for the Wild Ones National Organization, president of the Wildflower Association of Michigan, the recording secretary of the Michigan Botanical Society, and the vice president of the Great Lakes chapter of the Michigan Botanical Society. So in very good hands today. I'm also pleased to introduce Stephanie Day. She is the coordinator for the Mid-Michigan CISMA, which is housed at the Wildemar Nature Center and serves 4 counties around the capital of Michigan. She has extensive experience surveying for lesser celandine on public land in the Grand River watershed. And 2026 will be the second year that the CISMA has received funding from the Michigan Invasive Species Grant Program, which is specifically to target lesser celandine survey and treatment activities at the Portland State Game Area. So in April this year, which is coming up pretty soon, she's eager to return to monitor the lesser celandine sites that were treated in April of 2025. So again, very glad that they could be here today to talk about their work. Any questions you have for them, please put them in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of our presentation. All right, take it away, ladies.
Okay, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us for this webinar. Click ahead, Stephanie. So kind of an overview of our talk. I will be discussing part of it, and then Stephanie will take over. I'm going to be discussing the history, identification, distribution, spread, and impacts, and a little bit on the management. And then Stephanie will take care of some other parts of the management, the Michigan Lesser Celandine Coalition, survey and treatment, and outreach and volunteers. Next one. So with the history, Lesser celandine was brought here from Europe as an ornamental. It was first noted in 1982 in Michigan. It was actually noted by Dr. Tony Resnicek, who is the former herbarium director at the University of Michigan. It is currently found in 20 states within the United States, within the USA. And there's been for 35 years, there hasn't been much of a change. And recently, in the last decade or so, it has just become so increasingly aggressive. And in 2024, it was added to the Michigan DNR watch list. And all of the CISMAs here in Michigan and beyond are working to survey and treat this. Next slide. So as for identification, Lesser celandine, the scientific name Ficaria verna. So it's either another common name tends to be called fig buttercup. So Ficaria means fig-like, and it's the tuberous roots that look like fig-like, but I honestly don't see any resemblance. But verna is the interesting word. Verna means of spring, and that is when we see this plant. And it is in the family Ranunculaceae, which is known as the buttercup family. Next slide. So it is a herbaceous spring ephemeral with fibrous and tuberous roots. It typically gets 3 to 6 inches tall, but it can get as tall as 12 inches. But that is about at the end of its growing time, because it's typically, we find it a lot in wooded areas where there's a lot of water or next to rivers. And of course, as the canopy begins to fill in, it begins to stretch. The stems and the leaves feel very succulent. The stems produce the bulblets. The leaves, they're simple, they're basal, they're kind of heart-shaped. They're very, very glossy and wavy edges. The flowers have 8 to 12 petals, yellow, very shiny, about, they're fairly small, about 1 inch long. And in regards to seeding, it doesn't typically, we haven't really seen a problem with the seeding, but it's the bulblets that are the real problem with this plant. And the bulblets are formed in the axils of the leaves. Next slide. So here's some images for identification. There's that flower. If you see the leaves, very shiny. The tubers, and maybe the only good thing is it is literally just below the soil surface. And with the bulbils, you can see those little kind of creamy colored white balls. Those are the bulbils. Those are really kind of the biggest problem with this plant. And we'll be discussing that a little bit later. Next slide. So the life cycle. They typically begin to leaf out February and March under the leaf litter. They begin to bloom from April to May. Bulblet production is mid-April through mid-May. And then usually by that first week of June, the plant has senesced. I have already had one person who I helped control this in their yard the past couple of years. She just sent me a photo 2 nights ago asking if this was Lesser celandine. I said, yep, that's what it is. So I told her, I said, we'll wait a couple of weeks, but I'll get on it. Next slide. So for that identification, the image on the left, you can see those tuberous roots that I dug this plant up, and you can definitely see those little tuberous roots. Then the middle side, you can see where the bulblets are being formed in the leaf axil. And then with the penny there, it's kind of a scale just to look. And these are bulblets, and it looks probably Rachel's hand, who's been helping quite a bit with this project. And that's a handful of bulblets. That is what they look like. As that plant senesces, those little bulblets or bulbils, they drop off. Next slide. These are a couple lookalike species that we often get photos from thinking that, oh my goodness, this is, I've got lesser celandine. So marsh marigold typically found in in marshes, but it's much larger and it doesn't have as many petals. And if you can kind of see the leaves a little bit, they're a little on the serrated side, so they're jagged, like sharp jagged. And they don't have that glossy feel to them at all. Swamp buttercup, again, not as many not as many petals on the flower, but also very, very dissected leaves. Wood poppy, only 4 petals. And again, very dissected leaves. None of those are glossy or succulent in any manner. Next slide. So this is the distribution in the United States from just recently, 2026. And you can see where it kind of started out in the Northeast and it's made its way across. Of course, the plant was in the horticulture trade. And then we started obviously seeing a problem once that was brought over. And you can definitely see that huge gap in between, right down in the heartland. And chances are that's because A, it might be too cold, B, there's not enough water, or C, it's too hot. So just depending on what the climate and what the growing conditions are in those areas. And then you see it on the West Coast. That is probably because it was in the trade, and that whole area is actually perfect for this plant to grow in. The image on the right is in Michigan. This is where we're seeing some of those points that we've been taking through a collaborative effort of people recording those points and sending us pictures. Next slide. Here's the growing zones. So we know that it grows between zone 4 and 7, which if you look at it, that's a lot of the United States. But in that heartland area, it's probably just too dry for those plants to survive. So that's why there's that huge gap in between. Next slide. These are observations from 2024 to 2026 that were reported in Michigan. It is typically, we are finding this plant along river corridors, and which is just not the best area because it does like it damp and the rivers are transporting it. So from Lansing, there is the Grand River. So the Grand River starts kind of in Jackson, Michigan, and then makes its way into Lansing, through Portland, all the way through Grand Rapids, Michigan, and then out to Grand Haven, then it ends at the lakeshore into Lake Michigan. So that is its carrying, that's its transportation right now. Next slide. So as I mentioned, how does it spread? It prefers floodplains. That is typically where we are finding it. It will grow in turf grass. I've had a couple of clients that I have worked with to try to eradicate it it's been in their turf grass. They didn't plant it. Wildlife are moving it. We saw areas when we were in the Portland State Game Area, and there was we were exiting the state game area, and then all of a sudden we looked over in this little depression, and we were at least a good 200 yards away from where the main population of this plant was. But right through the middle of that was clearly a deer trail. And deer have those split hooves. And if it's muddy, it's compacted into their hooves. They walk, it eventually dries, it drops out. There it is. Humans are moving it. Mowers, soil, pets, it can get up into the dog paws. Recreation, just people walking through areas, getting it in their shoes, and they take it home with them. I have definitely seen it in a yard, actually in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I knew where there was an infestation. It was actually at one of the local colleges that was about 2 blocks away. So somebody probably picked it up, or a dog picked it up, and then came up to the neighborhood, got into the grass, it fell off. There it started. So decontamination is very important if you are in those areas to brush off your footwear and outdoor gear to prevent it from spreading to new areas. And also the Play Clean Go program that is very active here in the state of Michigan. Next slide. So this is actually the client I'm talking about who just happened to send in a picture saying, is this what I think it is? And it's the picture with the lawn on the left. And I said, oh yeah. So this person, these two condos, they didn't plant this plant whatsoever in their yard, nowhere. And they actually contacted us, I want to say 2 years ago, saying that because we had a lot of publicity going out, and they saw our interview on TV and started to contact us. And so I've been helping them just kind of now spot getting rid of some of them that she hired a landscape company. And this is what the amazing part is that her condo association quoted her for us to dig that dirt out and replace it. And she would have to pay for this. They were asking $12,000, which is absolutely unheard of, especially when she didn't plant it. So she managed to get a landscape company, and I worked with the company a little bit to say, this is how we need to treat it. And so they killed all the grass. They'd used glyphosate. So I said, we may just have to kill all the grass and start over again. And so that's what they did. So it was much less, but again, she still had to pay for it. And when I was out to her house last year, and just a couple of days before, her neighbor across the street, because it's a condo association, so they have a landscape company that does all of their mowing. And she was outside, neighbor across the street came over and said, well, what you haven't done? So she explained, and he goes, man, I'm so glad I don't have that in my yard. She looked in his yard and she found 4 plants that were blooming. And she goes, yeah, you do, right there. And so what spread it? Probably the mowers. So landscape companies, if it is in areas like this, they don't know the difference. They're all about mowing and moving on. It gets stuck underneath those big mowing decks. They go to the next client and it drops off and we're moving it. Next slide. So this is what it looks like in a wooded habitat. The monoculture you are seeing is all lesser celandine. And the image on the right is lesser celandine competing with our native geranium, Geranium maculatum. It is also competing with our wild ginger, Asarum canadense. And this is what happens. It is a thicket of, it is just a thick carpet of celandine. Little plants like Spring Beauty would have a really hard time getting through that. These guys, yeah, the geranium and the wild ginger, they're a little stronger, so they can kind of get up and through it. But some of our small perennials, spring ephemerals have a much harder time. Next slide. So this was really a cool project. The Portland State Game Area, it's 500 plus acres located along the Grand River in Portland, Michigan, which is just to the west of Lansing. And it is one of a handful of sites in the state of Michigan where the snow trillium is found. And if you've ever seen snow trillium, they're about 2 inches tall. And those flowers may be about an inch wide, and that's it. And, as Michelle mentioned, I work with the Beal Botanical Garden here at Michigan State University. And we got permits through the state to actually collect some specimens of snow trillium and bring it to the Beal Botanical Garden. And we have it planted around in the Beal Botanical Garden because every time I'm seeing snow trillium at the Portland State Game Area, it is surrounded by lesser celandine. So this became kind of a big priority for us to start actively treating. And so Stephanie has just been absolutely phenomenal in getting this spearheaded. Next slide. So impacts, recognizing the costs of these infestations of this plant in natural areas, it's loss of habitat. It disrupts pollinators. As I mentioned, I hardly see any spring beauty coming up in these areas. And there is a spring beauty mining bee that only feeds on spring beauty. So if spring beauty is eliminated from the system, so is that spring beauty mining bee. It disrupts the food web. It reduces shelter and nesting sites. It can impact on water quality. The overall ecosystem is imbalanced. In managed areas, it can be expensive to treat, as I mentioned that person with the condo. Difficult or impossible to eliminate, and it spreads so easily, as we mentioned, on mower decks. It loves these floodplains. It loves these rivers. Spring melt, these high, these strong rainstorms we're getting that just raise the river, and those bulblets float, and they move down the river, and they get deposited elsewhere, which is why it has gone from Lansing all the way through Grand Rapids and probably in and around the Grand Haven area already. Next slide. These are just some of the native spring ephemerals that are at risk that are found in these areas. Spring is my favorite time of year. As a botanist, I am all over the state trying to see as many spring ephemerals because, it's a short-lived season for them. And when we're getting these mats of lesser celandine, these guys get eliminated because a lot of them just aren't tough enough to get through that mat. Next slide. Stephanie, you want to take over from here?
Yeah, sure. I can take over from here. So, this slide of managing the lesser celandine, these photos are taken in my yard. And so this is describing an example of if you have a very small infestation. What I did for like treating this manually is digging essentially the like 4 inches of the turf out and then bagging it up and double bagging it in the trash and disposing it that way. So that is a good way for a very small infestation. It was successful. Please remember to remove all the tubers and the bulbils from the soil. If any of that is left, then it will become next year's plant. Do not compost this because the plant parts will survive and grow if you are using the end compost. So if you do manually treat a spot, monitor it the next year. And I know that for large areas, this is not successful, or this is not like as achievable as a method to remove the lesser celandine. But for larger infestations, what we're recommending is glyphosate applied at 2 to 3%. But please remember to follow the product labels. All the companies are going to have different instructions on their labels for what is safe to use for this plant. But there are studies at different universities in different states that show 3% to be the most effective. Apply the herbicide when it's 50 degrees out and dry for a few days. Ideal like application time is when the plants have leafed out and there's some flower buds. You can spray it when it has like started flowering, but make sure that you are treating it before the bulblets form in the leaf axils of the plant. So once the bulblets form in the leaf axils, that plant can be killed using the glyphosate, but those bulblets will drop off and be in the soil to reproduce next year. And the glyphosate is not impacting the bulblets. It is impacting like the green leafy growth. So definitely take caution when applying herbicide in wet areas and use an aquatic safe herbicide. And remember that the label is the law. This photo is of a treatment that Carolyn and I did on a very small patch at Woldemar Nature Center, which is where Michigan CISMA is housed. And so we will be going back and treating this location this year. So the reason why Michigan has really been able to achieve what we have so far for like management of lesser celandine is largely because of the work of Rachel Murray at the Eaton Conservation District and her coordination and collaboration to build a Michigan Lesser Celandine Coalition. And so we have a lot of local parks and CISMAs and other organizations and conservation districts that have been involved in the process and applying for grants and seeing what we can do to get to spread awareness about lesser celandine in Michigan. So kind of some of the history of the coalition, like Carolyn said, lesser celandine was observed in Eaton County at Fitzgerald Park. And then the next phase of the movement was concerned citizen reports making the news in 2021. Then officially the Michigan Lesser Celandine Coalition was formed. They have applied for multiple grants for the Michigan Invasive Species Grant Program, and unfortunately have not received awards. So that has funding has been a challenge for us, but we continue to encourage municipalities to start treating in their areas. And because we have worked so hard on this coalition and building relationships, we have gotten local parks, townships, cities to start treating lesser celandine in their area, and that having them like concerned about this and invested in wanting to do something about it is something that we are so proud of. We are also encouraging CISMAs to apply for survey and treatment grants to treat lesser celandine in their areas. And fortunately, in 2024, lesser celandine was listed for the Michigan DNR as a watch list species. And so that means it's easier for the CISMAs to get like watch list species funding for them to be able to continue treatments. And so Mid-Michigan CISMA, I'll talk about this in a little bit more, but we were able to apply for grants and get funding for a specific project for treatment at the Portland State Game area. And I had a meeting with the DNR recently, and they are going to be treating lesser celandine on state land in their areas. So some of the mission for the Michigan Lesser Celandine Coalition is coordinating volunteer survey efforts, giving presentations over the last few years that includes pesticide applicator trainings so that we can reach pesticide applicators and they can get continued education credits, but they're learning about lesser celandine, which is important because it's a newer species that Michigan is treating. So we're needing to spread awareness to like landscaping companies and other pesticide applicators. We are like interested in expanding our partnerships. We have a really great Google Drive, like public access folder that has tons of resources in it for everyone that finds out about it to use, everyone like in the coalition. There's no like official membership for the coalition. It's just letting us know that you want to be involved. And then we will share the resources with you. And yeah, so we're able to provide like signage and everything to municipalities and share information with other CISMAs so that they can learn more about like best like survey and treatment methods, and be able to share outreach material with their community as well. This is an example of a sign that I created that I'm actually going to get some printed with some CISMA funding that we have in order for our local municipalities to put this sign up at their public parks to raise awareness about lesser celandine. So I will chat a little bit about the Portland State Game Area project. So Mid-Michigan CISMA has 4 counties near Lansing, Michigan: Ingham, Clinton, Eaton, and Ionia. And Mid-Michigan CISMA applies every year for survey and treatment objectives for our grant program. And we applied in 2024, which has given us funding for 2026 or 2025 and 2026. And so we are going back multiple years in a row to the Portland State Game Area, where we're hiring contractors, surveying 100 acres and treating 25 or more acres. Last year we treated 26. This year, hopefully, we'll be able to treat 30 or more. So this is an example of like the coalition showing up to survey for lesser celandine at the Portland State Game Area. In this photo, you see DNR, folks from MSU, MNFI, conservation districts, Mid-Michigan CISMA, Michigan, the Michigan Wildlife Conservancy, and then PLM is the contractor, and his team was out doing surveys at this date too. You can see the stars. So on March 24th last year, when we did our initial survey, you see the green leaves within the stars. That's what the status of the lesser celandine growth was last year at that time in March. And so it was really underneath the oak leaf litter. But we wanted to start our surveys earlier so that treatment could be done at the ideal time. So here's some examples of this taking when I was monitoring, surveying for lesser celandine, the spring ephemerals that you can see: Virginia waterleaf, spring beauty, trout lily, that the lesser celandine is just completely like crowding out. Here's some photos of the post-treatment monitoring in order to assess the effectiveness of the treatment. So it did look like the treatment like killed the lesser celandine quite effectively, but this year when I go back, I will be evaluating how much regrowth there is, because like the plant can die, but we still need to know if the tubers in the soil survived, and then all the bulbils that have been in the soil like that, those could easily be causing dense regrowth this year. So one of the things that I have been really excited about is the momentum that I have been able to like gather for volunteer survey efforts. So I have worked with Claire of the Midwest Invasive Species Information Network to create this special app. Well, it's the Quick Capture app and is an ArcGIS app, but we created a special project specifically for lesser celandine for CISMAs to use. And I have this flyer that includes all of the instructions and identifying features for volunteers to be able to correctly identify lesser celandine. And Last year, I was able to get 28 volunteers helping with this project. So our goal was to get a total of 100 acres for the grant that I had wrote. But with the work at the Portland State Game Area and the volunteers helping survey in our local parks, we did over 400 acres of surveyed land, and included in that, the volunteers reported over 35 acres that were positive for lesser celandine at local parks. And so now we can share that information with all of our local parks so that they know which areas have dense like lesser celandine that they can work towards managing, and to prioritize treatment for the following year. And so the reason why we decided to do this quick capture project is specifically so that the volunteers surveying for lesser celandine, that the Mid-Michigan CISMA can track all of that data for this specific project instead of MISN in general. So it also is like user friendly and works on like a wider variety of phones. With the MISN app, you kind of need the app needs to work on like the most up-to-date software on your phones, whereas the quick capture has more flexibility with that. And it is simplified to just like taking a photo, it records the GPS location, and then you enter some information about like about the like density of the plant, the phenology of the plant, is it flowering or not, the size of the area, and then entering like the name of the park helps me keep track of like all the parks that we're surveying. And there's a map feature also. So all of the volunteers that are participating in the survey effort, they can see the map with all the green dots on all like of positive reports of lesser celandine that volunteers and myself have entered. And so they can see like where lesser celandine was reported last year, and they can work towards going to parks that don't have lesser celandine and monitoring those as well. So here's some photos of the volunteers receiving training and helping me look for lesser celandine. I created these flyers, these ads, essentially like posting on social media, like a Facebook event, so that people could sign up to come. So it's open to the whole public. And the turnout for that was generally like 5 or 6 people each time would come, but that's totally fine because you know, those people were very invested in continuing to do survey work outside of that initial training session, which led to us getting over 400 acres, which was really awesome. So I did want to chat about the different municipal parks that have lesser celandine. I'm highlighting the ones that their park managers and directors have agreed to treat lesser celandine in those areas. And also these parks have, they worked together to write a priority species grant for the MISGP, the Michigan Invasive Species Grant Program for lesser celandine, as a collaborative effort between these like 4 or 5 parks. They did not receive the funding, but just the fact that they care enough to put all of that time and effort into writing grants so that they could get funding for lesser celandine. It's a result of the Michigan Lesser Celandine Coalition spreading awareness about that. And I know that these parks are invested in doing treatments on their own, and maybe in the future they'll be able to get funding to help out with that. They can always keep trying and keep applying for grants. So this is Cooley Gardens in Lansing, And the lesser celandine is like taking over the lawn and crowding out the ornamental plants in this beautiful garden. And we had a volunteer treat last year, so I'll be monitoring it this year. Um, and Fitzgerald Park, here's an example of the lesser celandine infestation at Fitzgerald Park, but you can see if you look closely all of the native spring ephemeral plants. Like Fitzgerald Park in Eaton County has a great amount of biodiversity of spring ephemerals, and so our goal is to keep treating there, encouraging the park staff to keep treating there in order to protect this biodiversity of spring ephemerals at the park. And the park director has been like very much supportive and on board with like wanting this to get treated. And also he actually took the initiative for himself and some staff members to get their pesticide applicator license so that they can treat it. And that was largely like due to the coalition educating them and encouraging them. Okay, so we are towards the end of our presentation, which is great. We're right on time. We've got a quiz for you to spot the lesser celandine. So yeah, you can put in the chat if you would like which A, B, or C you think is lesser celandine, and we would love to see your answers there. Keep in mind like the amount of petals that lesser celandine has and the leaf shape, and also how shiny the leaves are. So if anyone is interested in joining the Lesser Celandine Coalition, I know that Michelle linked the website that is hosted by Onia Conservation District. There's a QR code also that should take you to the website where you can find out more information and the direct like contact information for reaching out to like myself or Rachel to get more involved if you would like. That website has information on reporting, training materials, and volunteer opportunities for serving for lesser celandine. So thank you for coming, and I will leave this slide up for a minute in case you want to take down our contact information. We really appreciate having this opportunity to present about lesser celandine. And yeah, thank you so much. Michelle, I'll turn things over to you.
Okay, terrific. Thank you both for being here today and for sharing all that information. I may have you actually share your slide deck again, just in case there's any questions that come up and we want to refer to anything that you've already shared. I think we can go ahead and leave that up. We have one question so far, but I'll just invite everyone. We have about 15 more minutes so we have ample time for questions. If you have one and you just haven't had a chance to put it in the chat yet, please do so. But the first one that we received is, do you know how long the bulbils stay viable in the soil?
We don't. And that is something we're trying to see if we can look at. And I'm really hopeful that because we actually had a real winter here in Michigan, which included these, very low temperatures, that maybe some of that will knock it back, maybe knock back those bulbils. And, one of the reasons we think this has expanded its range is climate change. We're getting these flash flood events, and this plant got out into, into our landscapes, and then managed to get into stream and river systems. And with those flash flood events, it's raising rivers and it's moving downstream, but also, we haven't had those, I grew up in Michigan, having these very cold winters. And this is the first time in probably since 2013 that I remember a super cold winter. And in 2013, we actually had that, we had the polar vortex year. It was one after the other. And since then, we just have not really had a good winter. And so, we're kind of thinking that maybe these warmer winters is possibility for the expansion of the range of this plant. So we're actually thinking about trying to partner with some research faculty here at MSU in gathering bulbils, and let's try shoving them in a freezer at different temperatures and just see what happens. And then try to see if we can germinate them in a greenhouse, in a research greenhouse, just to see what is the viability. So we're not sure what is the viability. We don't know yet.
Okay, so here's another one. Do you know or have you seen lesser celandine and stiltgrass growing together? And if so, how do they interact?
We have not, but I know we do have stiltgrass here in some areas of Michigan and actively working on it. So I am not sure if they are being found in the same areas. I don't know.
Let's see. Is this something that's still available for sale? Is it still in the horticultural trade?
As far as we know in Michigan, we haven't seen it yet. But doesn't mean, anybody in Michigan who might go to nurseries, keep an eye out for it. And if so, let your local conservation district know. And that goes for anybody else in any other state. Let people know. I know this plant is a problem in Indiana. It's creeping into Ohio. I'm sorry, well, it's in Ohio, it's creeping it, it's definitely in Illinois. But contact your conservation districts, saying, why are they selling this? And I could go off on a tangent on other plants that are still being sold in the trade, but I will hold that for another day. But yeah, if you see it, say something, please.
And then we had another question, just kind of asking a reminder from your presentation. What are the ideal conditions for treating this? So temperature, number of dry days, things like that.
Go for it, Stephanie.
Yeah, so 50 degrees is best, and that's like from the glyphosate label. Um, and then if it can be dry for 2 to 3 days, that way you're not like spraying plants that are wet or spraying and then it's going to rain the next day. Um, and yeah, I guess like being mindful of like the wind conditions and things like that too, so that there's not too much like off target drift.
Yeah, and I'm remembering we had a MIPIN presentation on lesser celandine a few years ago, and one of the things I remember about the management technique they were discussing is that they also said what you said about 2 to 3% glyphosate was effective, but they also found that if you applied a higher rate, it actually was less effective because it was burning the
Mm.
plant but not killing the plant. Is that do you have you seen the same thing or are you following
Mhm.
that same guidance?
Yeah, we're following that same guidance, and that's what I learned when I started treating it here at MSU. Same thing. Don't go any higher than 3%.
Okay. So we have a comment here. 2 springs ago, I put some lesser celandine in a covered bucket without soil And a year later, the plants leafed out in the bucket without soil. Um,
Yep.
and it said this year they seem dead. So I suppose we have a happy ending to that story, I guess, but a very resilient plant, it sounds like.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
And then we still have time if anyone wants to drop any additional questions. I'm also going to just circle back. Stephanie, you mentioned a folder of information that was publicly accessible. Um, I don't know if that's something you can share in the chat, or if maybe we want to collaborate and share that with your attendees later.
Yeah, since I'm sharing my screen, it's hard for me to access the file, but I can get that link to you, the
Okay.
public link with the resources. I'll do that later today.
Okay. And we can also make that a link on the MIPIN website too, if we can discuss that, and that might be another resource for folks. Okay. Um, I just give everyone another maybe 30 seconds or minute to put any following questions in the chat. But as we're waiting to see if anything else pops in here, I just want to thank you both again for sharing your time, sharing your expertise. Um, I know this plant is also a priority for MIPIN to try to get the word out, so appreciate you helping us to do that. Do you guys have any other maybe final comments you want to share before we wrap up today?
I think, just, eyes on the ground, especially in those wet areas where, there is a running water source that seems how it really likes to spread. And reporting it. Stephanie has done an absolute amazing job at, getting volunteers together to go out and survey, learning how to use, our, you know, various apps. And iNaturalist is a great app as well. So those of you who might be not in the state of Michigan, use iNaturalist, because somebody's going to look at it and potentially that gets funneled to, wherever you're located, to a conservation district. And they may reach out and say, we need to go find this so that we can stop the spread of it. So keep an eye out. As I mentioned, this client, it's popped up. I haven't seen it elsewhere. I might go take a walk later on if it stops raining. But yeah, Stephanie?
Yeah, it's definitely starting to grow in the area. I've done a little bit of survey by the Red Cedar Natural Area this year. Just wanted to tag on to what Carolyn said about reporting. So there's a variety of ways to report it. Um, the Midwest Invasive Species Information Network is a great resource. You do have to have an account. But then you can also it's nice because there's so many maps accessible when you look up the species, where you can see all the reports and everything that have been submitted, and you can also see in your account a list of all the reports you have submitted. I know EdMaps is also common as a resource for reporting in the Midwest. And also wanted to note that in Michigan, um, at least for our highest priority invasive species and watch list species and everything, um, MISN goes to iNaturalist and pulls those reports and imports them to MISN. So if you are using iNaturalist because that is like the most convenient for you, know that that does get like imported into MISN. Also, if you have a CISMA in your area, when you're reporting on MISN or iNaturalist, putting a note about like naming the CISMA, because that helps them know that like you're trying to get reporting done to help them, which is great, and they can use that for grant metrics.
And I'll chime in because I've been a lot part of these conversations too about sharing data across some of these apps too. Make sure you take pictures. It's really, really, really helps make sure that these reports can be verified and shared if there's good photographs to go with it. Um, Yes, and so we did have a comment. Yeah, outside of Michigan, EdMaps is probably the most common. It can take time to import data from iNaturalist, so that's all true. We're trying to facilitate that information sharing. I can send a follow-up to this webinar to everyone who's attendance. We can share these different apps, and you can use the one that makes sense for you based on where you're located and accessibility. Um, I also dropped in the chat a link to our post webinar survey and a link to our MIP and donation form. So again, if you want to help make sure we can continue to offer these in the future, we really appreciate um, even a small amount helps. Thank you again to everyone for joining us today. Thank you again to Stephanie and Carolyn for presenting. Um, and I hope that you all have a great rest of your day today.
Thank you, Michelle, for letting us talk.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
Bye.